Sooner or later, you're going to come to what Dante called the dark woods. Dante, in his famous poem, the Inferno poem, wrote, "Midway along the journey of life, I woke to find myself in a dark wood, for I had wandered off from the straight path." I work with men all day, every day. I tend to work with men around midlife. You can call that 40s, 50s, somewhere in that space, younger and older, but that's the majority of the men I work with. And every single one of them resonates with this idea that some point on the journey of life, you come to the dark woods. You can call it whatever you want, but I don't think you need to call it anything other than the dark woods. It speaks for itself. The dark woods, the place where the straight way has been lost. And that's the point. The straight way, what has worked up until this point in midlife, no longer seems to work. And it shouldn't work. Why would we expect that something would work forever? Teacher of mine, Carl Jung, says there are three phases of life. In a famous poem he wrote, a quote he wrote called, he named these three things: the morning of life, the afternoon of life, and the evening of life. And you can sort of define those how you want. It's, up to you. But bottom line is morning of life, he defines as somewhere before 40 years old, afternoon of life, somewhere north of 40, and evening of life is harder to define, but it's the sort of waning latter years. The morning of life to the afternoon of life, he wrote, are different rules, different goals. If you expect them to be the same, you're going to struggle. The guys that I coach and guide who try to live by the same rules in the second half of life become frustrated, or become caricatures. They're chasing the things of the morning of life that are no longer suitable for a middle-aged man to chase, or defining themselves by old ways, old rules, old goals. And they live constantly with frustration or disappointment or a feeling of failure. Because as a great book once said, what got you here won't get you there. And so this 40s crossroads and north of 40s, it's very important to really think about, what's the dark woods that I'm facing or that I've been unwilling to face? So the work that I do, I just help men, as I say, face and embrace and move through the dark woods. Because our natural reaction tends to be to what another teacher of mine calls avoidance, a void dance, a dance around the void. Where our natural reaction, especially in this day and age, in this modern society, is to dance around the void, to try and find ways to go around the dark woods, as opposed to, well, what Dante was suggesting, what Carl Jung knew to be true, to go into the dark woods. Because the dark woods aren't a detour on the journey or an impediment on the journey. It's the journey. You need the straight way to be lost at the midlife juncture. We need to stop void dancing, finding 1,000 ways to keep the dark woods at bay, either through medication or through changing partners or through changing professions, or however you're going to define, or just numbing out, staying busy, doing more work. That's just more void dancing. There is only one way through the dark woods, and that's through the dark woods. It's not an obstacle. It's an invitation. The men that I know who face and embrace and move through the dark woods, it ain't fucking easy, but it's meaningful. And that's why we're here. We're not here for easy. We're here for a life of meaning. My kids know this, but I've always asked them the question that a teacher of mine, Dennis Prager, told me to ask them 30 years ago when I learned from him. He said, ask your kids, do you think your mother and I want you to be happy, successful, wealthy, or good? And most people think that happy is number one, educated might be in there, number two, successful, wealthy, whatever. I don't give a shit about any of those things. Do I want my kids to be happy? Of course I want them to be happy. But do I need for them to be happy? I don't need for them to be happy. I need for them to be good. And I don't just mean who's been naughty and who's been nice, Santa Claus bullshit good. I mean living a life of goodness, of something bigger than themselves, contributing to society, contributing to their loved one, contributing to their family, doing more than just taking up space and living a happy life. Because the truth is, ain't none of us gonna live a completely happy life. We may never truly know happiness. I hope you do. I want to. I have known bits and pieces of it, but I've known goodness. I'm committed to goodness. And goodness is about doing hard things and learning from them and making it a little bit easier for those who come behind us. When you go through your dark woods, you're teaching your children and their children how to face it, how to embrace it, how to move through it. When I was a rabbi back in the day, nobody wanted to talk about death. It's still pretty much off the table. Like, it's a weird thing in our society. Almost nothing is off the table except death. You know how many successful people I've talked to and worked with and guided back as a rabbi or now as a logotherapist who haven't prepared for their deaths, don't talk to their elderly parents or grandparents about death, haven't faced their own death when they're in their evening of life. It's craziness. How are our children and our children's children supposed to learn how to navigate life's dark woods, life's dark moments, if we don't navigate them, if we don't go through it, if we don't share our experience? So returning back to that midlife crossroads, this is when different types of dark woods start to present themselves. And I want to encourage you to start to think about the midlife crossroads where the straight way is lost is not a setback, but actually the way forward, a way to grow, a way to live a life, maybe not happy. It's not usually very happy in those dark woods, but it's meaningful. It's important. And when we face what we face in there is always ultimately good. So that's what this is about. In my book, The Guy in the Glass, Are You Ready to See the Man You Were Meant to Be? Takes place just before the dark woods. As you'll read in there, it's a guy who's setting out to go camping in the dark woods. He's reacting. He's not doing it proactively. He's had a fight with his wife. He's going out to the dark woods. But before he gets there, he makes a pit stop at a bar called Vic's, where he has to kind of gather himself, get ready for the dark woods. So read this book on your way to the dark woods. You can read it while you're in the dark woods as sort of a reframe of the dark woods. You can read it looking back on your life, taking a retrospective, taking an examination of your life. You can read it looking forward in your 20s or so of where you're headed. But it's really, ultimately, it hovers around the edge of the dark woods, a place that every man should fear to go, because if it weren't fearful, there would be no courage and it wouldn't be worthy. But a place where every man ultimately has to go if he wants to live not necessarily a happy life or even a successful life or even become wealthy, but absolutely, unequivocally, if he wants to live a good life.